And now's when things come together. Gavin Gee here from UltimateReloader.com. I'm midway through my full custom PRC build right here on Ultimate Reloader. Part of a larger series, 2 300 PRC rifle builds, 165 PRC rifle build. Hope that you're enjoying the action. Lots more to come. So far, I've covered the overview of the build. In the last video, I covered the barrel work, turning down the tenon, chambering, threading the muzzle, all of the related considerations, all of the different steps in the process. Now is that exciting part where we get to see the components and pieces come together. I'm going to finish off the barreled action by installing my TriggerTech Diamond for the Remington 700. We're going to put together the MDT ACC Chassis. We're going to install a whole bunch of weights, get it all put together and see how it looks. So let's get started. That had to be the simplest and most straightforward trigger stall I've ever done. The way the Kelby's action is designed, it's got the trigger hanger. There's 2 screws that secure the trigger hanger to the action. You just pop those 2 screws, pull off the trigger hanger, and then use a punch to drive the pins almost all the way through. You want them free from the middle portion where the trigger is going to slide in, but still in the outer side of the housing. Then you slip in the trigger. You flip the hanger over, you pound the pins down. You can actually push them. They're almost free floating in there with just a little bit of resistance, which is just perfect. You pound them flush, drop the trigger hanger back into the receiver, tighten the screws. I used a little bit of blue Loctite just because I'm doing that on all of the critical parts for this rifle. Trigger install done. Then it was time to start adding weights to the fore end of the MDT ACC chassis install. And it's got 2 types of weights for the fore end. There's interior weights and exterior weights. Interior weights, you drop them down in, you flip the fore end over, and then there's 4 screws that secure each of the weights. I started one screw, started another screw with minimal hand-tight torque, then did the other crossbolt positions, used a little bit of blue Loctite and used a cross pattern to tighten kind of like you would with the cylinder head on a car, just to make sure that they're torqued down evenly. There's going to be a bit of recoil here, so I wanted to use the blue Loctite again so that things didn't come loose. Now it's time to secure the M-lock weights to the exterior of the fore end. Excessive. Just the way I like it. I wish you could feel this. This has got 5 of the internal weights and 10 of the external fore end weights. These fore end weights are really simple to put on. You basically just throw a little Loctite on the end of the screw. You put it through the weight. You screw on the M-lock nut. Do that on the other side. Slide it into the slot. Hold it forward just like you would a scope so that it's in the proper orientation for recoil. Shift. And then you tighten down the 2 screws. Because of M-lock, the nuts behind the slots are going to turn and lock down, and that's about all there is to it. Okay, so the next step is going to be to put on the buttstock and the vertical hand grip. So the buttstock is secured to the core chassis by means of a single Allen bolt. And what I did was I took that single Allen bolt, I applied some blue Loctite to it, I started it in and kind of worked it in by fingers, and then there's a section there where you can't really get onto the head of the screw. So I used a 1/2-inch drive, Allen key driver, to kind of get it the rest of the way seated, and then used an Allen key, a regular 90-degree Allen key, to tighten it. And I applied a fair bit of torque to it because this needs to be a solid union between the buttstock and the main part of the chassis system here. We don't want any flex or anything like that, but it's very secure. It's not going anywhere. Then it was time to install the vertical grip. And what this has is kind of a body that attaches first. It's a backbone, if you will. There's an angled screw that goes in. I used blue Loctite on that as well. And then there's 2 halves here. The 2 halves clamp over the body, and you've got 6 screws, 3 that hold each side of this assembly together. And they've got washers behind them, and they're in slots. And what that allows you to do is to loosen them. You can move it back and forth a little bit, backwards and forwards, towards and away from the trigger area, and then you can tilt it very slightly and then lock it back down. So what I did is I looked at sort of the length of pull of my finger on the trigger and got it to just the optimal spot, locked it down. If I don't like it, I can always change that in seconds in the field later. So at this point, the chassis system is assembled. So now we can take our barreled action and drop it in place. And I'm just going to be mindful of the trigger, going through the trigger cutout. I've got the recoil lug here right up against the inletting. And what I like to do is I like to put these vertical and then hold it securely with one hand. The MDT ACC Chassis does come with the appropriate action screws. So I'm just going to get that to where it's finger tight and then loosened, backed out just a little bit. The longer screw goes in the back here. And again, I'm making sure that it's not being cross-threaded. There we go, that's good. Okay. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of a wrap against the bench. And what this is going to do is it's going to help seat that recoil lug against the inletting. And then we will work the torque up a little bit. Give it another little bit of a wrap. And what MDT specs for the torque is 60 inch-pounds. I've got my Wheeler Engineering fat wrench. It's set to 60, double checking there. All good on that. And I'm just going to alternate between these two screws. I'm using two different tool systems here. I'm using the Lyman bit with the Wheeler fat wrench because I didn't have the right Allen key, so this is going to come out periodically. But okay, this is something that you want to take your time with and you want to get just right, because action screw torque is a critical factor when it comes to consistently shooting rifles. Okay, so we've got the barreled action installed in the chassis. That looks pretty awesome. Wow. This is going to be so awesome. So what we do now is I've got some 300 PRC cartridges loaded in this single stack AICS mag. I'm going to put that up through the bottom. You see we have a little bit of vertical float here. And one of the factors that I'm going to take a close look at is what is it going to take to feed rounds reliably? If I push forward, okay, so we're skipping, the bolt is skipping over the cartridge. So we need to be up a bit. Just going to work this a little bit. Push it forward and hold the magazine up. That should be about right. Okay. So what I need to do is, it looks like I need to tune the vertical position of the magazine a little bit. And fortunately, MDT actually sells different length magazine catches. So I might get a longer one and get that tuned just right so that we have perfect feeding. This is encouraging because 300 PRC is one of those cartridges. It's longer than 300 Win Mag and it's shorter than something like 338 Lapua. So we have the right long action here. That looks like the chassis is going to work great. Just got to do a little bit of tuning on the magazine to get that functioning perfectly. There's a couple more things I need to do before we take this rifle to the range. One is install the Benchmark tactical muzzle brake. This comes with a small opening. You can use this with 22 cal. I've got this on my 224 Valkyrie, all the way on up to 30 cal and beyond. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the opening all the way through to be bullet diameter plus 20 thousandths of an inch. So it'll be 328. And then I'm going to profile the back, and then I'm going to cut the back down so that when it seats against the shoulder here at the threaded muzzle, it's going to be at just the right torque and it's going to be clocked just perfectly. That way I can, in the field, use a wrench to install and remove the brake, use a suppressor. It's going to be good. Then I also need to think about an optic, and I've got ideas on that, but I'm going to save that for the next story. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications. Lots more in this series for both 6.5 PRC and 300 PRC. Lots of range actions, ballistics. We got long range shooting, tons of good stuff. So if you have something specific you want to see, drop a comment. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Until next time, happy shooting and happy reloading.